Welcome. Today, we will share a love story that promised eternity, but ended in a breakup. Stay tuned to find out how fate sometimes plays with our feelings. It is not for nothing that my mother instilled in me from a young age the belief that all men are untrustworthy creatures, and their nature is such that, in the end, they inevitably hurt those who trust them with their hearts. I, however, did not take her words seriously. In every conversation with my mother, I steadfastly defended my point of view, trying to prove that among the representatives of the stronger sex, there are those who are worthy of respect and love. As an example, I invariably cited my husband, John. "You'll see," she said one day with unyielding conviction, as I once again proved to her with passion and fervour that my John was the noblest, most well-mannered and most dignified man I had ever met. Sooner or later, he will drink your blood. When you get married, the first years you live like in rose-coloured glasses, and then everything changes and your prince turns into an ordinary goat. I didn't want to believe in such predictions. The love for John was so strong that I, like a cat, lost my head from every meeting with him. I got married not because it was necessary, but because I was truly in love. My whole being trembled with the happiness that it brought. How could you not fall in love with John? He was perfect in everything, smart and well-mannered, and besides, handsome, as if descended from the artist's painting. He came from a noble and respected family. His father, Nick Sergeyevich, is a world-famous professor, although very old. John was born when his father was already under 60 years old. John's mother, my mother-in-law, was 3 decades younger than her husband, but their union was not the result of mercantile calculation. Nick Sergeyevich, who devoted his whole life to science, by the age of 50 suddenly realized that he had no family or heirs. After weighing the pros and cons, he decided that it was time to start a family and pass on his genes. He carefully selected his life partner, choosing the most worthy of the women around him. His attention, care, and tenderness turned out to be so sincere and deep that my future mother-in-law floated and, unable to resist his charms, accepted his proposal. This is how John was born, the only and beloved son, on whom his parents pinned great hopes. They surrounded him with care and attention, like a fragile flower in a greenhouse, and for a long time they did not want to let him go free, even opposed his marriage to me, believing that no woman could be worthy of their precious son. "You don't seem worthy of my son," were the first words I heard from John's mother when our conversation turned to the upcoming wedding. I was stunned and so startled that I involuntarily opened my mouth, unable to find the words to answer. My simple-minded reaction may have only strengthened Anna Sergeyevna's conviction that I was not fit to be a daughter-in-law. In her eyes, I was a hillbilly, unable even to restrain my emotions. "I love John, and he loves me," I was finally able to say. I loved John sincerely and wholeheartedly, with all my soul and with all my heart, and I knew that his feelings for me were just as strong. Our relationship was filled with passion and warmth, a sense of deep mutual understanding and attraction that seemed impossible to destroy. A year after our wedding, our son was born, whom we named Nick. John's father, Nick, had already passed away by that time and, unfortunately, did not live to see the birth of his grandson. However, in memory of him, my husband acted nobly and gave our son the name of his father. This gesture seemed especially touching to me, and I was sure that our family had become a model to follow. We were surrounded by love and mutual understanding. Complete harmony reigned in our home. We both made good money, and soon we were able to afford a spacious 3-room apartment in the city centre. Our son had everything that could be desired. He attended the best sports sections and scientific circles. He always had the most modern gadgets. John did not refuse Nick anything, following his principle that children should be given everything that can make them happy. I couldn't argue with his parenting methods. John was truly the perfect father. He never resorted to methods of coercion, did not use carrots and sticks, but built relations with his son on the basis of respect and trust. Perhaps that's why Nick was so attached to his father and always attracted to him more than to me. At some point, I wanted to give birth to another child, a girl, but fate seemed to oppose this desire. I visited doctors, underwent numerous examinations and treatments, but everything turned out to be in vain. When Nick was 13 years old, I had already come to terms with the idea that I was not destined to become a mother for the second time. I have one child, and that's good, I told myself, trying to find comfort in it. As always, I listened to his words, because my husband was a smart and balanced man, always thinking carefully about his advice. However, the mother-in-law didn't seem to have any intention of backing down. Her words sounded like an order to me, but I was no longer able to fulfill her wish, and this only increased the tension in our relationship. When John and I were 35 years old, the situation with my mother-in-law Anna began to take on an increasingly obsessive character. She literally clung to the idea of the second child, like a tick. Every conversation we had with her boiled down to the same thing: get treated, do something. She commanded with as much confidence as if pregnancy could have been caused by a mere effort of will. This pressure of hers was becoming unbearable for me, especially considering that she herself had only one child, and she seemed to have completely forgotten about it, demanding more and more sacrifices from me. John, as he often did, listened to his mother's opinion. This made us return to the topic of the second child again. However, this time, I was not going to put up with the situation. In my heart, I told John everything that had accumulated. You need a child. Go and examine yourself. I'm fine with that. I'm capable of getting pregnant and giving birth. So maybe it's not about me at all. John resisted this idea to the last, refusing to admit the possibility of a problem on his part. But, as you might expect, Anna stepped back into the game, supporting my arguments. I need a second child, she said imperiously. So come on, son. Go get examined. If it's not about your spouse, then maybe the problem is with you. At the same time, you will check your health. But even under pressure from his mother, John did not dare to undergo an examination. The lack of action on his part, in the end, led to the fact that the situation began to grow like a snowball. My futile attempts to get pregnant only increased our mutual disappointment, and a year later, after another failure, we decided to divorce. After the divorce, I filed for alimony, and John honestly fulfilled his obligations. The apartment in which we lived remained with me, and I continued to live there with our son Nick. John, despite the breakup, remained a caring father. He paid for all of Nick's additional classes, went abroad with him on vacation, and I did not interfere with this. Soon, John had another woman, and I understood that she had managed to insist that he finally get tested. My ex's second wife had no children, and she really wanted to give birth, so the issue was especially acute for them. When John finally decided to be examined, the results were shocking and unforgiving. It turned out that he was infertile and could never have been a father. My mother-in-law, Anna, was the first to tell me about this, with whom we continued to keep in touch, solely for the sake of discussing issues related to Nick's upbringing. She broke the news with special force, as if trying to gauge my reaction, and then asked a question that pierced me like a knife. "Are you sure Nick is really from my son?" I couldn't help but laugh, which was more nervous than funny. What a statement! I would never have thought that Anna Sergeyevna could doubt my loyalty, and especially since John would take her doubts so close to heart. However, this conversation aroused suspicion in him, and soon he decided to take the extreme step of taking a DNA test. The test result was a stunning blow to both of us. John found out that Nick wasn't his biological son. For me, this discovery was no less shocking, although some details of my past, which I preferred not to voice, now surfaced in my memory. In the early days of our marriage, there was one incident that I never considered significant. At one of the corporate parties, succumbing to the moment and getting pretty drunk, which is extremely uncharacteristic for me. I responded to the courtship of a colleague who had long shown sympathy for me. This fleeting connection did not seem to me to be something important, and I quickly forgot it, considering it nothing more than an accidental mistake. However, now the consequences of this act have become all too real. John, having learned the truth, stopped paying alimony, abandoned Nick, and broke off all communication with him. This decision was a terrible blow to our son, who suffered more and more from the lack of his father's love and attention every day. I could see how much it affected him, how Nick withdrew into himself, trying to understand why his father, who had raised him for 14 years, had suddenly cut him out of his life. "All right, punish me if you want," I tried to reason with John, hoping for his former nobility. "But the child has nothing to do with it. You brought him up, loved him, were everything to him, and now you just threw him out of life as an unnecessary thing." But John was adamant. "He's nobody to me, and you're nobody to me." He cut me off coldly, and I realised that Anna Sergeyevna, without a doubt, played her part in this. John's relationship with his second wife also did not work out, and perhaps this embittered him even more. After the divorce, he went all out as if trying to forget himself, but this only aggravated his condition. Dissatisfied with his life and furious, John sued me, demanding compensation for all the alimony he had paid to Nick since our divorce. The court did not satisfy his claim, and this defeat only added fuel to the fire of his hatred. From that moment on, he began to demand money from me personally, and when he realised that he could not achieve his goal in this way, he decided to act in a different way. "Sell the apartment and give me half of it," said John, my ex-husband, his voice ringing with anger. "It was bought in marriage, and I, as an honest man, left it to you. You dishonest creature, have treated me like the last idiot, so give me half or I'll sue you." There was a fury in his words, which he tried to conceal with an artificial sense of justice. I could see that there was not only a desire to get the money back, but something deeper and darker, a burning sense of humiliation and loss. He was crushed by the realization of his inadequacy as a man. How else can I explain the fact that I became pregnant from a single time from another person and lived with him for almost 16 years without giving birth to a second child? This defeat had become unbearable for him, and now he was looking for a way to settle scores. The most painful thing for me in this situation was how our actions affected Nick. My son, innocent of anything, became a hostage of this tragedy. He was just a victim of John's and my mistakes, but instead of supporting him, we, his closest people, became bitter enemies. It hurt me more than anything John said or threatened. He demanded money with a persistence that frightened me more and more every day. The calls did not stop. His voice sounded on the phone every day, and each time he poured out a stream of threats on me. He promised to set fire to the apartment, or, even worse, to set hired thugs on me. I had always thought that there was nothing worse than an offended woman, but now I understood. An offended man is a destructive force, 1,000 times more dangerous. I was getting scarier. I was afraid for myself, for my son, for our home, which had turned from a cosy family nest into a place of constant fear. I felt the ground slipping from under my feet, the dark chasm created by John coming closer and closer to me. Every day was filled with anxiety and anticipation of the worst. Persistent thoughts swirled in his head. What if he really hurts Nick? After all, he had almost no other ways to influence me, and this one seemed to him the most effective. What should I do? How to get rid of his attacks? How to protect yourself and your son? It was impossible to live in constant fear, but I could not find a way out of this vicious circle. All that remained was to keep fighting, but my strength was already running out. The story is coming to an end. and I stand before you at a loss, not knowing what the next step to take. John, once a loving husband and caring father, has turned into a man who is willing to ruin our lives just to appease his resentment and anger. Fear for myself and for my son has become a constant companion, and I don't know what to do next. Maybe you can help me find a solution. What to do in such a situation? How do you protect yourself and Nick from John's threats, keep what little is left, and move on with your life without looking back in horror? Write your thoughts and tips in the comments. Your words can be the ray of light that will help me find the right path.